bury their oldest son. That was not easy at all. It was very difficult, trying time. But they did it in faith. And Naomi not only lost her husband, but all of her sons. So you can imagine the transition period that she was in the deep, dark depression. And she was living in another country. It wasn't even around her people. So during this time, even though the Bible doesn't specifically say that she prayed, I can envision that that was the prayer during that time was what gave her the decision to go back to Israel. And when she made the decision to go back to her country and to her peoples, then she was careful to tell her daughter-in-laws, I've made the decision to go, but you guys stay. You stay here with your family, because I can't produce another son. I can't take care of you in that way. And Orpah stayed, but Ruth didn't. Ruth said, "Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people," and that shows a great commitment. So Ruth then went with her as she went back to her home culture. And again, I think when Naomi first decided that she wanted to go back to Israel, and then that Ruth, even when Ruth decided to go with her, I don't think she even had the plan unveiled or knew exactly what would happen. But then when she got back to Israel and Ruth went to glean the harvest and was in Boaz's field, then the plan began to appear as God began to show her, Ruth and Boaz could get married. And God, through the source of prayer, I believe that God showed her the plan. And in all of our transitions, I think that's one thing that we need to keep in mind, that God has a plan for us, that we wish we could see it. You can just send me the email. It'd be really obvious. And it's not that specific, but He always, if you look in hindsight in your life, during those times of transition, He's very, very good at answering those kinds of prayers.
We've done a little discussion on and David, when you talked about one of the things I wanted to share with you is a transition that we went through about 15 years ago. We had been missionaries for 13 years. We had become, or I had become, as Pohnpeian as you could become and not be Pohnpeian. During that time, the United States changed, and then all of a sudden, we came back to the States. And one of the things that I've found with men is we tend to base our identity in the job that we do. I was a missionary. That's what I was. When I came back to the States, I was no longer a missionary. That was a very tough time for me. I had to find out what I was from that point forward. I prayed a lot. God showed me, what to do. Where am I going to go from here? What would you like for me to do? And we really struggled through that during that time. That was a transition in our life that we really had to rely on prayer. And sometimes I wasn't very good at that. Sometimes I kind of gave up. God, are you listening to me? I know probably some people at times in their lives are thinking, is He really listening to me? He really is. He really is there. He is listening, and He understands your pain and your suffering. And He helped us make it through that time. We prayed a lot during that time. And I'm sure Kathy probably prayed that I would get my head on straight sometimes, because there were times when I wasn't doing very well with that. And when we came up here, that's another transition in our lives, a major transition, to move from Odessa, where I'd been preaching for 15 years, to Denver, where I'm not a preacher anymore. And I had to figure out, what am I going to do? And God's still working that out in my life. But prayer has been a very important part of my life for the last 30 years. What do I do with my life? Where are you taking me, God? What do I need to learn? And sometimes He's had to show me the hard way what I needed to learn. it's been a hard lesson for me in a couple of times. And I know that there are many people, maybe you have been in transition, and we gave you a sheet of paper here, and what I want to do is let you work on this for about 5 minutes and answer those questions, and then we'll get you to share the answers that you've written down with other people in this group. Because we're here to learn from one another. We have insights, each of us, that maybe someone else doesn't have. And it's a good way to learn.
You have some more sheets back here.
I made 30 of these, but I don't think that was enough.
Maybe they passed them out.
Okay.
Do you have an extra? Yeah, John.
We don't have time.
There's some back here too.
So just work on that for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll talk about that a little bit.
Some of you ladies might have to share with your husbands.
Well, I don't know.
That's not gonna happen. Yeah, it's more or less trying to just do it all again. I'm just trying to get the reality of the way it is. Kind of at the beginning.
What are you looking at here, what applications can I make about my transition?
So are there any examples like from the stories that how can this change your life? And how can you go forward?
Have you used prayer in your life to make it through transitions?
Or like slowly gaining attention to a degree.
All right. Recently, I stayed married for 4 decades. I was going to tell you because I know what's going
Probably not as much as I could. I guess my mentality is more than I've always kind of wanted to just kind of leave it up to God. I guess I've always had sort of a don't care mentality, but it might be.
Everybody pretty well got their thoughts down? How have you prayed during transition? Does somebody want to share their prayers during a transition in their life? Who wants to be the first one?
You know, I retired from work before John, and John was talking about retirement. Excuse me. And I think, oh, am I supposed to be recorded?
Oh, you're fine.
When I retired, I was home alone, and that was really great. And then John started talking about retirement, and I really prayed a lot about how that was going to work out in the household, because my routine was going to change. It was going to have to, because I was going to have to share the house all day with somebody that I was kind of used to them being gone, you know. So I did. I prayed a lot of that. That we would make that transition easier on each other.
Does everybody hear that? I think I've heard, that's a common theme. I've heard that a number of times from individuals. Anybody else want to share their?
We moved a lot over the years, in the early years of our marriage, and I always prayed that we would find a church.
Oh, good.
And so when my husband got orders for Germany, I thought, can you find a church in Germany? And when I went out there, I went to the PX, and there was a little note on the bulletin board that said, "Are you looking for the Church of Christ?" God answered my prayer.
Awesome.
It's amazing how he does that for us sometimes. Anybody else? Who else would like to share a time when they prayed during a transition? I know you've all had transitions.
Well, I'll answer, but the question being, have you prayed during transition? I didn't take it as a specific, but as a general, so I put
Okay.
yes, because God is the only one who truly knows what's going on with me and the circumstances. So talking with Him brings me peace, and I'm so grateful. So any transition, any trial, I talk to God because God knows.
Yeah.
That's
Good
it.
job. That's good. Thank you for sharing.
And he
does.
And he answers. He's a good God.
Anything else? Anybody else want to share? So, is there anything in the lesson today that you think you can use to help your prayers during transition? I hope that some of it will be useful to you. Anybody want to share what they?
Pray first.
Pray first. Don't wait till the last resort.
That's right. And,
You know, that is one thing that I kind of get a little bit irritated when people say, you know, I can't help you at all I can do is pray. That's the first thing I want. Please pray for me. And then, you know, anything else is
Icing on the cake.
Icing on the cake.
yeah, it is.
I believe we should always pray for direction in every incident, but change in our life. So many people say, gee, I really wish I would have in my life. And I really can't remember anything that I wish I would have done differently. Went back to, I dropped out of college when I had a scholarship, everything was paid. And I thought, that was a stupid thing to do. But had I not done that, had I stayed there, lived in Oklahoma, and my life would have been different. I would have met somebody different that I would have married. And so I'm happy now. I might not be happy if I had made different decisions. So I think every decision we make affects the rest of my life.
So it should be a decision that you pray for.
Right, exactly.
And you should pray before you make the decision, asking for God's wisdom and input. Anybody else?
Well, my problem was when I,
Wait for,
oh,
Yeah, that's all your problem.
She wants to get this recorded. So
My problem was, in the job I was in, I had the ability to solve my own problems and clean up my own messes. And when I retired, I found myself short on patience because I couldn't do those things. And I still have problems with that because I would do the things that I did when I was working 35 years. I could correct those problems and mistakes that I made by looking at the data that I accumulated. So then I find myself, no, I can't do that. And I go, this is,
the only thing you have left is prayer.
yeah, right. And struggle with that.
Mark?
So I find that when I pray, the biggest thing that I learn out of it is patience and trust. Now, if I trust in the Lord for all of my decisions, I mean, I can make lots of really good plans all by myself. And I think sometimes I offer him some good humor in doing that. So, but when I do pray and I do follow his lead, sometimes they're subtle leads, sometimes they're just in-your-face leads. But just when you ask him, take the time to listen.
Yes.
You know?
It's a good point. And Mark was saying, when you ask God for something, take the time to listen to what he has to say.
I don't want this recorded, but I told my wife, we were talking about Deborah, the moral of that is, don't go to sleep first if your wife is ticked off.
Pretty safe advice.
At least pray that she calms down before you go to sleep.
Oh, we do it. We lost our second child. He lived 3 days. We had no idea that he wasn't going to be healthy. We had one baby, everything worked really well. And then all of a sudden, I get this call during the night. Nani's still in the hospital. The doctor said, you need to get over here. And when I get there, and he tells me what, then we have to go up to the room and break the news to Nani. And we prayed tearfully a lot. But one thing it really did, it brought us closer together than we had ever been.
That's good. Prayer can bring you closer together with people that you love, especially, not only and also with God. Because what we have to think of him is our Father, our personal Father. Now, I don't like the idea of being frivolous when we address him. I'm not sure I like the idea of calling him Daddy, because he's not like an earthly father that we have, because he has the power to end us if he wanted to. And probably based on our our lives, he could. He has the right to do that, but he doesn't do that because he loves us, because he shows mercy. And so he should be the one that we go to when we're struggling, as we would go to a Heavenly Father, a Father who loved us a great deal. He should be the one that we share all of those struggles with, because he really does care. He just wants us to tell him about it, to share it with him. And prayer it allows us to get things outside of us and to deal with things that we're struggling with in life. And so when we're in transition, prayer should be the first thing that we do, and the thing that we do often, so that we can make it through those transitions. Because we all have those, and we all struggle with those. And so prayer is something that God has given us so that we can make life better. thank you for your thoughts, and think about those questions. And think about prayer as your first line of defense, not the last resort. It's the first place you go when you start having those and he pictures him as a merciful God. And he says when he did that, when he began picturing him as a merciful God, an all-powerful being who's really concerned about him, his prayer began to change. Jesus tells his disciples to pray to God as if there were someone actually listening. You know, sometimes we get into prayer and we tend to forget that there is actually someone on the other end listening to us. It's not just that we're praying into the air and no one is hearing. Do we pray as a last resort? Oswald Chambers was a little-known Scottish preacher. And this is what he said of prayer. He said, we tend to use prayer as a last resort. But God wants it to be our first line of defense. In other words, we tend to use it when everything else has failed, when we can't go any further. We pray when there is nothing else to do. But he wants us to pray before we do anything at all. Oswald Chambers really understood the importance and the power of prayer. There's a story that I share with people periodically, and it's a friend of mine, a preacher friend of mine, who went overseas, and he went overseas to do some benevolence work, and he got himself into trouble and got into trouble with the local authorities and ended up in jail. He's in this small cell with a small hole in the door, and he's looking out at every once in a while and seeing people walk back and forth. He's pacing back and forth in this room. He's trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? Because they told him if this happened, he might be here for a long, long time. And so he's pacing back and forth, and he's thinking, how can I escape? You know, can I overcome the guard and then run, and then I'll swim the channel to another country? And then he realized, I can't do that. I can't swim that far. And when he realized, I have nothing else to do, what can I do? I have nothing else to do. And then he realized, maybe I should pray. And he says, as he's relating this story, he says, that should have been the first thing that I did. Not a last resort.
So sometimes when we're in transitions and stuff, that's when Satan shows up. That's when Satan is really trying to tempt us and to get us to fall. And we need to really consider that and as it comes through. One of the things that we need to do is when Satan wants us to give up, he wants us to give up on ourselves. I don't know about you, but when I'm in those times, my self-doubt rises, and I have to really conquer that. You have to almost plan on shutting that down. Sometimes our families, we'll give up on our families. And sometimes our families are what Satan uses to tempt us. Sometimes I know people I've worked with people trying to come out of low-income areas into middle income, and as soon as they begin to make progress, their families pull them back down. And that happens religiously sometimes too, especially with disagreements. So be careful with that. Don't give up on your families, and don't let your families be the obstacle. Also our future. Sometimes we worry about our future. If I do this, then will that affect this, this, and this? And we overthink it. We need to make sure that we keep our goals, and the number one goal is heaven, but keep our goals in line and intact, and don't give up with them during the times of transition. And even our Heavenly Father, I know through divorce is a common transition period, and I always say that during that time, people either draw closer to God or go farther away. And I think we have to consider that regardless of the transition, whether it's going to college and you've never been around parents before, away from parents, and so a lot of kids go wild during that time. And just different transitions in life, we have to make sure that our focus, our ultimate focus is heaven, and that we don't give up on that. And the next thing is we need to be careful how we pray. Have you ever prayed for something and wished, oh God, why did I pray for that? Please don't answer that prayer. The one we always joke about is patience. You know, like when you pray for patience, God usually answers that by giving you additional trials. But we have to make sure that when we're praying, we're thoughtful about that. That you're not too hasty to speak, that you contemplate what it is. I know at times, and when I'm upset with someone, if I find myself, if I pray for them, then that eases my calm and helps me eventually over a period of time begin to be able to like that person. We need to be able to think about what we're praying as we go through those times. Do not be impulsive to make speech before God, because God is listening. And sometimes, you have to be able to consider that are you sure you really want this prayer? So think about those things, even during the depression or even during the transitional time, be able to think through those things.
Men in transition. We wanted to kind of split this up and do it this way because we felt like that men and women have different perspectives on life. And so they're going to necessarily have different perspectives on prayer. And so how did ancient men approach God the Father? Abraham approached God, and every time he approached God, he fell face down. Now that should tell you something about what he thought about the being that he was approaching. That he understood that this was the almighty, powerful God, the God who created the heavens and the earth, the God who destroyed whole nations. And so when he approached God, he was very reverent about his approach to God. And you can read, there's a number of places where it says that Abraham fell face down as God approached him and talked to him about what was going on. Another individual that we think about is David. David said, "I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge." Psalm 18, 1 and 2. But David has a lot of prayers in Psalms. You want to learn how to pray? Go to Psalms. Psalms has a ton of prayers there, and David says everything. I mean, he doesn't hold back when he prays to God. And so, really, when we're thinking about praying in transition, if we're having a hard time, let God know you're having a hard time. Ask Him for help. Ask Him to guide you. And David, many times, as he was praying and as he was struggling, and this particular Psalms says that he was struggling with life, but he knew where to go for that transition. If you read Psalm 142:57, that is called a Maskil of David. And it's a prayer while he was in the cave. And go and read that prayer there and look and see what David says. He's pouring his heart out to God. He was at a time in his life when he didn't know what was going to happen. That his enemies were chasing him. He was hiding in a cave. He was the king of Israel. And he was hiding in a cave. And so he understood very quickly that God was the one that he should turn to. God was the one that he should plead his case before. And when we're in transition, prayer is where we go. And David, in his transitions in life, went to... Moses was another individual who struggled with life and who wanted to be the kind of person that God wanted him to be. And if you look at Psalm 90, verses 1 and 2, it says that was a prayer of Moses. It says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all the generations before the mountains were born, or you were brought forth, and the earth, or brought forth the earth and the world from everlasting to everlasting. You are God." And so Moses understood who this person was that he was praying to. And he understood that God was responsible for everything in life. Everything that we struggle with. And then, of course, Jesus. You know, as we look at the life of Jesus and see what he struggled with, he was in transition while he was here. You realize this was only a temporary place for him. He was going back to his Father eventually. Hebrews says this, he says, during the days of Jesus' life on the earth, he offered up prayers and petitions and loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. That's how we should approach God in our times of transition.
All right, just for a minute, a literal minute, I want you to talk to your shoulder partner, and whoever's close to you. I want you to talk about the differences between men and women when they pray. What do you think? There's some commonalities. There's a lot of commonalities. But what are some of the differences about how women pray versus how men pray? So I'm going to let you talk for a minute.
Maybe from the head.
Right, yeah.
The men are they don't feel it.
Okay. Good conversation. I like that. Someone tell me, women, how do women pray? Or any comments about that? Or do I need to start with the men? You can tell me. What were y'all talking about? You're two men, so how? Tell me whether you're talking about men or women. Either one. Josh.
I just said, when my, wife is prayed, she has her daily devotions, so she knows what she's praying for. I guess just doesn't waste time.
Okay, very time efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, good job. Thank you. Any other comments?
I pray that our children will stay in the Word.
Yes. So that I hear that in the nurturing aspect of that. Women, and I'm not saying the men aren't nurturing, but women are very nurturing in their prayers, which is good. Good job.
I don't like my prayers to be public.
Okay.
I keep them to myself.
So you're very
Private.
you're private, but very God-driven,
Yeah,
and it's a direct line between you and God.
I'm the guy that likes to go in the closet in the dark.
Yeah, Matthew even talks about that. Good job. Good job. Yes, ma'am.
I've noticed in our prayers that I will list the children and the grandchildren by name, and he's mentioned it.
Okay, good. So women are often more specific, or sometimes more specific, and men are more
Sometimes,
general.
yes.
Yeah. I know when we first got married, we weren't to pray together, but I went down the list so much that Roy was getting tired and everything, like 45 minutes. He was like, I just want to say, dear God, help everybody. So that's true. Any other differences that people noticed? With men or women? How do men pray? I think it's very different. I think there's some commonalities. We talked about that in the introduction, that we're all talking to God, and we are all very hopefully heartfelt and have our own procedures and ways. But Roy, can you advance it for me? I wanted to talk about a few women in the Bible. Hannah was one that came to mind, and especially when you're talking about transitions. Hannah was stuck in a crisis that just would not go away. She loved her husband very, very much. And but he had, during that time, they had more than one wife, and the other wife was the one that was having all the babies. But she could not have babies, and then she couldn't do anything about it, and she was stuck. And the other wife was a bully. I mean, she was really condescending, so she was stuck in a very moment of crisis. And when she went to the temple that day, this is just a little bit of what she said. Lord, you rule over all. So she gave God credit and realized that he was in charge. Please show me how I'm. Please see how I'm suffering. Show concern for me. She was so intent in this prayer that Eli thought she was drunk. That's how intense she was. Don't forget about me. Please give me a son. She's petitioning God for what she really wants, and we need to do that in our prayers. If you do, I'll give him back to you. Then he will serve you all the days of his life. It goes on for just a little bit more, but you get the idea that it was very heartfelt, very passionate. That was one of the things I was thinking about. Men have emotions, and they have passions, but it's a magnifying glass for women a lot of times, and you can definitely see this with Hannah. She was very outpouring in her spirit, and she wanted, God, come on, look at me. I'm suffering. Please answer my prayer. She's very intent. And because I think that she did petition God, she did give him credit, God answered her prayer. And then she stayed true to her promise. You've heard that thing about the guy that was out about a quarter of a mile out, and he's swimming and he's afraid he's going to drown. And before he makes it to the shore, he says, "Dear God, please, please help me get to the shore. If you do, I'll give my entire life to you." And then he gets a little closer. "Dear God, please, please help me, save me." "Well, I'll give half my life to you." And before he gets to the shore, it's like, "God, I made it on my own," kind of thing. So I think sometimes we need to really have our goals set on God. We need to ask him for what we want, but we need to stick with that. Whatever promises we gave him, we need to honor those choices. Another person I thought about was Mary. Mary was a good Jewish girl. She was engaged to be married. Everything was going as expected. And then one day an angel came to see her. It scared her spitless. She was totally afraid. But then Gabriel said, "Calm down, don't be afraid." And then he gave her God's plan. God wanted her to be the mother of his child. And you can imagine all of the emotions that went through that. I mean, she had to go tell Joseph that she's pregnant, and I'm sure that conversation didn't go very well. But still, I loved the prayer, and it's longer than what I put right here, but this little part really summarizes what she said. "My soul gives glory to the Lord." I think that's one thing that we need to make sure that we're doing in our prayers, is praising God and putting him number one in our life. "My spirit delights in God, my Savior. He has taken note of me, even though I am not important." She was a very humble person. Even though God had blessed her with that awesome challenge and that awesome blessing, she was still very cognizant of that she was just a regular person that God had chosen. And from now on, all people will call me blessed. As she goes on in the prayer, she's going back to different times in history and talking about how majestic God was. And when you think about what he did with her, I mean, that's just as powerful as separating the Red Sea or all of the other miracles that he did in the Old Testament. So I think we have a lot to learn from Mary. And those were two specific prayers I noticed in the Bible for women, but there's some other ones that I thought were inferred, and that had to do with Deborah. Are you sure that's in this? Deborah was a judge in Israel. I mean, all of the other judges were men. Deborah was the only one that was a woman. But she was a prophet, which I thought I could definitely say in inference there that she prayed, because she had a very one-on-one conversation with God on a regular basis. She was a judge. They said that people came to the palm of Deborah so that she could decide between the different battles of people. And she was a leader for over 20 years. So this is a time when she asked Barak. Now remember, Barak is the commander of the army. And she calls him in and she says, "Okay, Sisera, he was not a good guy. He was you're talking about a bully nation. He was really oppressing the nation of Israel." And then she's telling her commander, "Go get him. God says to take 10,000 people and to go down there and take care of Sisera." And he's going, "I'll go if you go." He didn't have the confidence. He didn't have the leadership. He didn't have the courage to do what God was expecting him to do. So Deborah did go. She did say, "Because you wouldn't go, that God is going to give the glory to a woman." And if you remember the story, sure enough, Deborah goes. She went with him into battle, and sure enough, they dispelled the army, and they all went running in different directions. And Sisera, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he went into a tent. He's exhausted. Huh? And then he went into Jael's tent, Jael, and he said, "Oh, please, let me sleep here. And if anybody comes, you just stand at the door and tell them to go away." And she goes, "Okay, okay." So she covers him with a blanket. She lets him get into a deep sleep, and then she takes a tent peg and puts it through his head. So it was a woman who killed the leader of the army. But I want us to look at that as an example, that we always need to have courage in God. Even when the other people around us who we might expect to be the leader or might expect to take charge or not taking charge, we need to take charge. And we need to have faith in God and anchor our prayers and our goals in God, and don't be afraid to do whatever it is that God is asking us to do. And that is a transition time in the nation of Israel, and she hung to God for that. And then one more I wanted to talk about was Naomi. Ruth was the first one. This whole book of Ruth is about this story. transition. Can you imagine? Naomi's husband died. And that is a very dark, a desert time for people when their husbands die or when their spouse dies and they have to get to know, what am I going to do now? My mother and dad lived together for over 50 years and she had to decide, how can I go on? And then I watched my parents.
Transitions in life that causes sometimes so much pain and suffering. And thank you for your comments in our classes. I'm going to let you go a little early so you can go find a place to sit. Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Yeah, you?
It's
busy. It's busier than I ever thought I would be.
You getting ready for a wedding? No problem.
Getting ready for that, too.
Thanks, Gary, for...
When's your son getting married?
September 9th.
And you know what else I wanted to say?
Yeah, that's true.
And I wish this back.
He's our baby.
And you know what? They're in the office, on the work table, you know. I don't know where you would like them.
Well, I think since we have time, I might just take them. Just fix them. Can you live?
I don't think he'll stay that way.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, everybody. It's not too bad.
Well, you're Blair.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that'll be nice. Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. I'm gonna go put my coat.
Good.
Oh, this is the
We were there. We were there. Remember that, Jack?
We hope we can see you.
Yeah, we were there that
Okay, you were.
time. Yeah.
I remember that. I got that up to it. I said, close. Well, it was good. Some of you were getting
We just, you and I went back to Redstone and drove up, and we went by that little place.
Did you?
And I thought, I wonder if it's still there. I drove up and, God, we stayed with y'all. Remember June passed out in the
In the hot tub.
But I pulled
Stayed in
up,
there too long.
I pulled up to that place and pulled right up to the door, you know, and there's a little walk up there. There's a sign up there saying, if you can read this, you're in range. Which means we don't do it. They didn't want you to come up knocking on the door, I guess. If you can read this, you're in range.
You know what?
That was fun. I think we went about 3 times, didn't we?
Yeah.
It was fun.
Oh, we had to.
We had a great bunch of people. We did.
I remember that so well. We had real fun. Those were good times.
Well, that time in the hot tub, I literally passed out.
I used to listen to Brian get up and pray at West University. I knew exactly what he was going to say. I'm thinking that,
Some of those times we wish it was over.
I know.
I hope the younger generation probably thinks like that. Yeah, I don't know if they can or not.
Hey, Bill,
Yes, sir.
I can really relate to you. I totally can relate to what you said because I did the same thing. I mean, I went to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
And after a year and a half, I said, you know what, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
And I actually was going to pursue a career in music. And